Show number 111. So I hope you're doing well today. It is Wednesday, April 15th. It's about 12:30 p.m. And during this quarantine time, I hope you've been enjoying the additional ramped up level of content. We've been trying to do 2 to 3 shows a week, bringing you different perspectives from around, certainly around North America and around the world. Just yesterday on show 110, I was interviewing Wim de Vos from Genesis Technologies down in the south of Spain, and hearing how things are going in Europe. And today, I am very excited to bring you a longtime friend of mine and industry veteran, and that is the one and only Matt Lein, VP of Sales at DES. So, you know what? I just got a weird Microsoft message on my computer, and I run a Mac. So, all right, I deleted that. Let's hope that doesn't happen again. And let me make sure my items are silenced here. We are silenced. And then I'm going to go over to Facebook to make sure that I am actually streaming. So let me do that here. Bear with me. And there we go. I think we are live. So if you are out there watching live, don't forget to like, comment, and share. We love to hear from you. And if you're listening on the, you're listening after the fact. So let's say you're listening in the coming days, weeks, months, or years. You can still actively comment, and we're doing our best to monitor all of our shows to make sure that if you have a question, we're doing our best to get to those questions and getting them answered. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring in our guest, Matt Lein. Hello, Matt.
Hey, Ron. How are you?
I am good, sir. Where are you coming to us from?
So right now I'm at my home in Rogers, Arkansas, up in the northwest part of Arkansas, Walmart country. So I'm in my theater because it's about the only room I can find that's quiet right now. Everybody's here. The dogs are here. Everyone's here.
It is strange times we're in right now, isn't it?
A little bit.
How is your family making out? Is everyone healthy?
Everyone's healthy. I've got a senior in high school, so he's missing out on prom and graduation and all those kind of things. But, between Xbox Live and FaceTime and Snapchat and everything else like that, life hasn't changed for him too dramatically. He's just having a really long weekend.
Yeah, my son's 11, but everything you just described is what's keeping him entertained. What would we have done without the internet? That's the scary thought.
That could be, that would have been, I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah. And they were for thousands of years. That is what man had to go through, was the lack of all of these sources of entertainment. And here we are, spoiled modern Homo sapiens that are complaining about having
the world's content at your fingertips.
It's amazing. I do have some folks that are out there saying hello. So we have Angel. He's saying hello, Matt. Saludos from Mexico. Thanks, Angel. Hello. And if you are out there, don't forget to drop us a comment. Tell us where you're coming from. And if you have any questions for Matt as we go, don't be shy. Drop that down there, and I'll do my best to put it on the screen.
Keep the questions easy and the abuse to a minimum, please.
You were in the military, so you have a bunch of military buddies. So let's see if you guys can give any colorful questions for Matt that I can totally put him on the spot.
That would be such a bad thing.
That'd be a bad idea. Okay. All right. Let's not do that. Matt, where are,
here it comes.
I got to put it on the screen. Matt Devant says, Matt Lein, the face of radio.
Yep.
Matt.
I agreed to this when I thought it was an audio podcast. I didn't know it was video.
You didn't know there was video.
No, I didn't know.
Yeah, that's funny. All right, so Matt, let's go into the Wayback Machine and let's tell the audience kind of how you got into the industry, and then we'll talk about kind of your current role and gig. But take us
Okay,
back.
so when I got out of the Army, I was trying to find what I was going to do, and one of the things that was a hobby was technology and audio, video, and all that kind of thing. And there was a local place called the Sound Room in St. Louis where I grew up, and I'd go in there and hang out and talk to those.
Dave Young at the Sound Room.
Yep. And one day they had a sign for installers, so I thought, I'll give it a shot. I applied, I got the job, and I thought I'd be plugging in black boxes and speakers and all of that kind of thing. And the very first day they sent me to a job site to do a pre-wire. Had no concept of that, didn't know about that part of the industry. And so Andy Hauk, who I think is their VP of operations now, was the guy they sent me with. They sent me and another rookie with Andy to pre-wire an entire house. Andy wasn't happy, but he did his best to kind of get us through. And then I broke my foot my very first day at work.
Workers' comp nightmare.
Yeah, so that was not a great way to start, but it's probably what kept me in because they did the workman's comp thing, and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and so I was thinking maybe it's not for me. But because they had done the workman's comp, and I felt obligated.
How did you break your foot, by the way, on the first day of the job? Like what went wrong?
So they instead of putting a single board for the steps, they had like two 2x3s, and there was a slot right there in the middle. And because we were rookies, it went slow, and so we were still pre-wiring in the dark. So we're literally running around with flashlights, still pulling wires. And I stuck my foot in between one of those things and fell forward, and it just kind of snapped it. And I thought, well, that doesn't feel good. So we finished the day, and then from there, stayed there, and it was a fantastic opportunity. I mean, the installers there were awesome. They took a lot of pride in their work. And so I was there initially doing installs and then programming, moved on to the sales side because one of the things that they didn't have that's more common nowadays, there was no engineering department. So the sales guys were doing the designs, and sometimes you'd go out in the field and those designs were lacking. You've got 7 zones of audio, but 4 zones of amplification, that kind of thing. So I moved to sales to have more control, eventually went into management, was there for a number of years, and then I took a job with Crestron. And so I was the regional sales manager in Dallas for about 7 years.
What were the years you were at Crestron? Because you and I were co-workers when we were at Crestron.
I was there 2006 to 2013, I believe.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I didn't realize. So we only overlapped for a little bit. I was there 03 to 07.
Yep.
Okay. And then what was your territory? When you were with Crestron?
So I was hired to split the territory with another guy. There was a guy who was covering Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. And so we split Texas, and then I got Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. So that became my territory. And then later on, I would go and work with the guys in Denver a little bit too, and so cover some of the stuff in the Mountain States, working with them.
Got it. And then you decided to leave in 13. What inspired you to leave?
Well, I had a lot of good dealers, but I had a few that were stellar. But one in particular stood out.
Matt DeVance from DeVance Audio Video in Dallas was one of those stellar ones, right?
Matt DeVance was one of those stellar ones. Actually, Matt was pretty young. We had another dealer that was really angry that Matt DeVance became a Crestron dealer and said the guy would never amount to anything. He was just a trunk slammer, and we never should have signed him up. And look at him now.
Look at him now, leading Dallas.
Yep.
That was clearly very good foresight on your part.
I wish I could take credit for it. I didn't sign him up, but I'm the one who had to field the complaints. So,
okay.
But most of the credit for DeVance, audio goes to Dana, not Matt.
Oh yeah, clearly. Matt's just there. He's just the smiling face.
Exactly.
Dana's the magic in that business.
But no, I mean, I had a dealer DES up in Arkansas, which is where I'm at now. And it's funny because my original boss at Crestron, when I was going through my list of dealers and trying to get to know who everybody was, he told me, look, the guy who runs that company up there, he doesn't get our industry. He doesn't understand it. And I'm looking, and he was one of the top dealers. I mean, he was doing really good numbers with Crestron at the time. And so it didn't make sense to me that, okay, this guy's doing great numbers, but, my boss wasn't a big fan. And came up and met with him a couple of times. And he was the first one of my dealers that ever bought me lunch. And so we sat down and we had lunch for about 3 hours and just talked about our philosophies on business. Kevin Lamadonis is his name, and found that we really thought alike on a lot of things when it came to the industry and business and how things should be done and all that kind of stuff. And so there was a professional relationship there, but we became friends as well. And so that friendship kind of grew over the course of 7 years. And DES did fantastic work. I mean, if there was ever a Crestron project somewhere in the world that needed somebody to come in and rescue it, they were my first call. And so when it came time to make a change, DES was looking to bring somebody, and I was looking to make a move. And so that's what I did. So we packed up, left Dallas, and came up here to Northwest Arkansas.
Got it. And what's your role now? What's your role and responsibilities? And regarding the company, can you tell the audience just a little bit about DES as a company?
So DES been around since mid-90s. So they've stayed in business for a good long time. Kevin actually started the company as an IT company with another partner, and eventually kind of, those guys split up and were doing their own thing. And Kevin started with more of the automation stuff on the AMX side, but eventually moved over to Crestron. And because he had a computer engineering and an IT background, he was way ahead of where most AV companies were when it came to embracing networking and all of that kind of thing. From a programming standpoint, he actually had a top-notch software development team. So it wasn't, his programmers were not guys who used to pull wire and now wanted to sit on the couch with a laptop. I mean, these were guys that were degreed software guys coming out of college that he then taught them this business. And so the first time I really got a sense for the software side of what DES could do was they had an iPad app called HomeSuite that was designed to control Crestron systems. And Crestron had released their own app that had some stumblings, the first year or so that it was out. Didn't work fantastic. But HomeSuite, you'd have a floor plan of the client's home, and you'd have a page for each subsystem. And if you wanted to, listen to an audio source, you just take that audio source and drag it to the room. And while that seems very common now, this is, 10, 11 years ago.
This was before C#.
Yep. Well before C#.
Interesting. How did they do that?
So I'm not a programmer, so I don't understand it all, but it is a native iOS app. And so they wrote custom modules on the Crestron side and created hooks over on the iOS side for those.
I see. So they used iOS programming and UI capabilities and then successfully hooked it into the Crestron system. Yep. So you had a more beautiful, more polished UI experience.
Oh, it was gorgeous. And the first time I saw it, I took a video of it and I was showing it to people at Crestron, and people were like, that doesn't work. That's not real. That's smoke and mirrors. I'm like, no, it does.
It's stuff. Real. I've been on jobs. It's real.
you do this thing and it actually works. And so, and there were just a lot of things like that. That was the flashiest one. But when it came to the engineering, the documentation, everything, they were the guys that were doing everything the way that most companies are kind of aspiring to do it. And so, when I had an opportunity to come, it just made sense.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. And I want to give a few more comments. Eric Gunter commented, Matt still has his salmon colored shirt. So I don't know what that means, but I think he likes your shirt.
I wore it just because I knew he'd be watching.
You knew it because Eric would be watching. That's funny. And then he posted, he said, I never said that. So I don't know. That's funny. So, in terms of DES today, are they mostly doing work in? Is it mostly residential, mostly commercial? Is it
It's
mostly in
shifted to more
Arkansas?
residential. It was more 50-50 when I first came on. They were doing a lot of commercial and they were doing a lot of residential. Now it skews more 70% residential. Part of that is that, you know, Kevin made the decision to get us into the electrical contracting side of things about 2.5 years ago,
Mm.
which has automatically shifted more of our projects to the residential side. And it's turned out to be a great decision for us because one, it's getting us in earlier, and two, as the price of some of these things has continued to go down, you have to find ways to maximize the dollar potential with each client. And things that used to cost tens of thousands now cost thousands. Things that used to cost thousands now cost hundreds. So, but you still need the same number of people. You still need the same resources to implement that stuff. And so the electrical has been a real boon for us.
Oh, that's cool. And your responsibilities as VP of sales, is it you selling? Do you have folks selling with you, or that you also manage? What does
It's
that
me
look like?
selling and folks that I'm managing selling. So a little bit of both.
Okay.
But they do most of the heavy lifting.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And you were talking about the HomeSuite software. Where does that stuff stand now? Did that get retired with the evolution and the ongoing evolution of technology and UIs, or are you guys still using your own proprietary UIs?
We still use our own proprietary UI, but we do the big three. We do Control4, we do Savant, and we do Crestron. And quite frankly, Control4 and Savant have done really good jobs of making their systems easy to deploy and having a compelling UI, especially if you look at the Savant side of things. And so a lot of people, go to that side. The advantage of HomeSuite is it's the best, most elegant interface out there for controlling a really large home or multiple homes, because it's not list driven; it's floor plan driven. But there's an expense with that customization, and now things have gotten good enough that we do see people choosing to go Control4 Savant, and now Crestron Home, now that that's starting to be a real thing. But there's still some HomeSuite projects we're doing out there.
Well, I'm curious if you're willing and/or able. I've got a good question here. So sorry, Sarah, I'm going to get to your question in 1 minute, but before I go to Sarah's question, what how do you position as the director of sales or the VP of sales? How do you position whether the client should be quoted a Savant system or a Control4 system or a Crestron system? How do you think about that? How do you position that in terms of, does the customer even know the difference?
They do. I mean, what we will typically do is we will either let them put their hands on it, or we'll give them some videos that allow them to sort of see what those are ahead of time. Even though the systems can kind of all do the same thing, there are some unique differentiators between them. And we really don't try to sell people things. We try to educate people as much as they'll allow it. And you have some people, for instance, I'm dealing with a gentleman right now that he will look at every link that I send him. He will read everything that will go through. And that's going to be a fantastic experience because he's investing in the education up front so that, he can make a good decision. But we usually start with some 2 or 3 minute videos that we send them, and we just kind of give them a small snippet of, okay, here's where this fits into this world. Here's where this one fits. Here's where this one fits. And then they kind of guide us after that. And everything kind of branches off of that piece, if that makes sense.
Is it challenging to support all three platforms? And then, by the way, there might be other platforms you're also supporting, so I only named a couple. Is it hard to support, or how do you manage the support of those different platforms versus, say, consolidating around one?
So I think it's harder if you were coming from a Control4 environment and then trying to support Savant and Crestron than the way that we did it. You know, from a software and programming standpoint, you know, Crestron has always been harder to do than the other two. So the other two are, you know, pretty straightforward, pretty easy.
Yeah.
That makes it not too difficult. And all of these companies have gotten much better about getting online resources so that you don't need to ship your team to a training facility all the time. I mean, you get the occasional class that they have to go to, but there's so much stuff online that, you know, guys can sit down at a desk and bone up on these things.
Yeah.
So,
all right, let me jump into Sarah Drescher. She posted the question. It looks like, yeah, it's all there on the screen. Hey, Ron and Matt, how have you shifted your sales strategy to continue selling during this time? And of course, she's speaking of COVID-19 and the quarantine. Right. And I want to get into some of that as well with you. I know it's affected your son, right? He's a senior in high school.
Yep.
And
it's affected him, and it's affected a lot of people. But I mean, really, for us, we're not in the same situation that you're in down in Miami, or that, you know, people are in New York or something like that. It's funny. I looked up the numbers. You know, there's 8 million people in New York, and they're crammed into 300 square miles. We have 3 million people in Arkansas in 50,000 square miles. So we were already kind of socially distanced to begin with, and a lot of things have shut down here. But with us being an essential business, you know, so to speak, and people being home, we really haven't had to shift how we're doing our sales. The only thing we've really had to shift is that more of the meetings are happening either over video chat or by phone, or a lot of email stuff if people aren't necessarily comfortable coming to the office and seeing some things, or if they're not comfortable with somebody coming to their home right then. But activity wise, it really hasn't tapered off for us.
In terms of the change in selling strategy, right? So personally, I've been video conferencing and doing this work from home, sales from home thing for firmly as a business since 2015, and leveraging video conferencing for a long time prior to that, because my customer base is throughout North America and around the world. For you and your team, are you finding that face-to-face meetings are not happening and everything is going to the virtual meeting?
No, I've actually had a number of customers who've had no problem coming and sitting at a conference table, or having us come out and, you know, meet with them. Obviously, we're not shaking hands, and we're, you know, being careful,
keeping your distance,
like,
but you're in the same room.
Yeah. So it really hasn't shifted that much for us. And we don't have a stay-at-home order the way that some states do. So there's nothing that impedes travel or coming through. Their people, they're just saying, hey folks, you know what's going on. Use your common sense. You know, it's very different for the restaurant workers.
What are you seeing in terms of volume differences in transactions or sales? Has it affected your business yet? Or are you off? And if you're off, are you off a lot or a little?
We were off a little bit before this. Okay. What we're seeing is the activity ticking up a little bit, but it's not as much big ticket stuff. You know, people are sitting at home and they're suddenly realizing that their network stinks, you know, because there's now 10 people in the house trying to use Wi-Fi at the same, or 10 devices trying to use Wi-Fi at the same time. And so that's not a big ticket, you know, kind of project, but it's really important for the client who's,
it's moving a little bit of cash.
Yep.
And at least you're perhaps maybe picking up a new customer, which might need more stuff down the road, I would think.
So, I mean, we're staying busy. And construction wise, we're not seeing as many new starts. So I'm not as worried about right now as I am about, you know, what's going to happen 4, 5, 6 months from now.
Yeah.
That's really more my concern at this point. But, you know, hopefully we're taking good enough care of people that are out in the world. And I think that people are going to want to probably reinvest in their homes a little bit more towards the other side of this. I'm sure that there are some people who, you know, decided not to do the home theater, decided not to do the media room, or, a whole number of things, the outdoor audio. They decided not to invest in those things because they go out and they do stuff. And I think some people are going to want to invest in making their homes a better nest should we ever find ourselves here again.
I just finally this morning paid for the motorized shades for my house. I was like, well, I got time on my hands, might as well put them in. So let's get the order in.
Absolutely.
So that makes sense. Matt, our friend down in Dallas, did just ask a question. He says, "Hey Matt, I've been thinking about taking on an electrical side to our business. What were your challenges in deciding to also offer electrical services?"
There's a number of them. And Kevin has really led up that part of our business. And the fortunate thing about him is he's one of those guys that once he decides he's going to take something on, he'll learn how to do it better than anybody else can. So he can sell better than anyone in the company. He can engineer better than anyone in the company. He can program better than anyone in the company. And so on the electrical thing, he's taken that bull by the horns. Personnel was one of the big ones, finding the right guys because.
Did you buy the license? Did you buy the master electrician or with the proper, trade certifications?
Had to.
That's the only way to do it, right?
Yeah, have to. You've got to get the licensed guys. It's one of the benefits to the electrical side of things that sometimes I wonder if we wouldn't benefit over on the low voltage side of things because, if you hire a master or a journeyman or an apprentice, you kind of know where they actually are, in their experience level and all that kind of thing. And obviously you can have better or worse journeymen, you can have better or worse master electricians, but there's at least a minimum amount of hours and schooling that they've had to go through to be able to be a master electrician. So that's beneficial from a hiring standpoint. I think some of the learning came in, one with how customers and builders look at that and how we looked at it. I mean, we're AV guys and we're extremely particular about how we wire things and doing it neatly and nicely and everything like that. That is not a hallmark of most electrical businesses, especially on the residential side. And we've always liked to engineer things very specifically at the beginning. And for the most part, neither the client nor the builder, unless you have a project where there was an architect involved who really did a solid lighting design and an electrical design and the appliances were picked out and all of those things, all the stuff that you need to have a fully realized electrical design, most of that stuff is really not figured out too much on the front end, which is why you have so many instances of, the client walking through the house with Sparky going, I'll put a can there, I'll put a can there, I'll put a can there. That's the engineering. And so we had to adapt ourselves to the market and stop trying to make the market adapt to us, where we said, okay, we want to sit down and we want to get all of this figured out before we go in so that we can give you a solid number and a solid plan and everything. Nobody wants to do that. They're not ready. They're not at that part of the journey where they're really ready to invest any thought in that. Once the sticks are up and they can walk around in the space, then they're ready to have that conversation. But 9 times out of 10, not before then.
So you've had to accommodate some of the processes that you would call normal processes for the low voltage side of the business, where we do want to pre-plan and document. Mm-hmm. You've had to modify that just because you don't always have that luxury in electrical side.
Yeah, it's to pre-plan. It would be the right way to do it. It would be the best way for the
Is there a style of project or a size or classification where that does happen? Like the super big, I'd like to think the super big house has a lighting designer and they're thinking about these things in advance, or no?
I think it really has more to do with the builder that they choose to work with. Okay. Different builders like to do it different ways, and we work with a few, and, some of them are very much kind of figure it out as we go along, and they still manage to have a fantastic result at the end. So it's not like their process is broken.
Yeah.
And then, we work with a couple of builders who they are very much like us when it comes to that thinking, where the more that we figure out on the front end, the better off we are. The nice thing about figuring out on the front end is that the budget is more accurate than it typically is the other way.
Matt asks one more question. Are you guys selling fixtures?
Yes, have been for a while.
So that would that be a recommendation if you're going to do the electrical thing to also do the fixture thing?
Absolutely. I mean, it's where a lot of the money is, and quite frankly, the better fixtures, the ones that actually, you know, they're not the junky contractor grade stuff that's going into a lot of houses, big and small. You know, those distributors are hoping for somebody like us to go in and specify their stuff, and
they need someone that knows how to sell better gear.
Yeah, and you know, the one thing that, you know, when people think about it, I mean, lighting makes all the difference in how everything else in the house is presented. You know, the architecture, the interior design, all of it. I mean, if the lighting is garbage, then, you know, all of those things suffer. But if you get a great lighting design and you get fixtures that allow you to achieve it, you know, it makes all the difference. It's the difference between, you know, the cinematography of a Martin Scorsese film versus, you know, sitcom lighting, you know, and most, you know, far and away, the vast majority of homes have sitcom lighting. They don't really have that, you know, layered artistic lighting that really complements the space. But I think that's changing. I think it's becoming more, I think it's becoming more asked for.
What's your position, Matt, as a company on really two nuanced components that are maybe tied together, and that is the LED lighting, so color change. You know, when I say color change, red, green, blue, you know, colors in purple,
Yep.
and the tunable lighting, the idea of the sun, you know, the light in your room matching the light of the sun, the circadian rhythm lighting. Are those resonating with you within your company and or to your customer base?
The tunable lighting, yes. The tunable white, I think, look, I mean, scientifically, we know that there are real benefits to that. And I think that once somebody understands the science and if they have the budget to accommodate it, it's really kind of a no-brainer, because there is a massive effect on how you feel. The RGB stuff, I think it's gimmicky. I think people occasionally want to do it in a media room or a game room or something like that. But I think it's one of those things, if somebody does it in their whole house, like with a Philips Hue or something like that, it's one of those things, it's cool for like a week. And then
I've been kind of, you know, I'm in a role here as I'm marketing for many companies out there. And I've personally just been kind of scratching my head, like, who wants a purple room? Like, I don't get it. But I mean, clearly people do. I'm not knocking anybody out there listening that's delivering purple rooms for their clients. I've just found it a bit curious as to, is that a fad? Or is there something more that I'm just not grasping yet? Whereas tunable light in the science of the light in your house matching the position of the sun and the effect of blue light causing you to be alert, and you probably want to reduce that at night so that it's more calming. Like I guess the engineer in me, the left brain, is going, yeah, I dig that. That makes sense.
Yep.
I buy that. And I was curious though, what is the customer buying that? Is the customer?
I think so. I mean, I can't think of anybody who's come in and said, I want to do RGB lighting, in any way, except we've seen some people ask for it for exterior lighting. You know, game days, maybe they want to throw up Razorback colors, and maybe for Christmas they want to do their green and red and stuff like that. So, you know, when we've had customer requests for that, it's really been more exterior lighting than it's been interior lighting.
Theme based, tied to a holiday or some
Yep.
team that they support.
Yep.
Got it. That makes sense. What to take the conversation a completely different direction here, Matt? What are some of your hobbies, you or your family's hobbies? How are you guys spending this quarantine time?
Well, I like what I do for a living, so there's a lot of that. But
there's a lot of work.
we've used the theater quite a bit. My wife and I have motorcycles we like to ride, so we get our social distancing in on the weekends by getting out on the bikes and, getting out as long as it's not raining. And really that's kind of it.
Are you
what we do. I
reading
like
any
to listen.
books? Are you watching more movies? Are you listening to more podcasts? Are you
A
doing
lot of
anything?
podcasts, a lot of books. I've always really, for the last few years, I've been listening to podcasts much more so than I do watch the news or listen to news programs or something like that. Sports radio I haven't listened to in quite a while. But 9 times out of 10, if I'm in my vehicle or if I'm exercising or whatever, it's probably a podcast. It's probably not music. It's probably not, and sometimes an audiobook, but not fiction audiobooks. I mean, more the business stuff and that kind of thing.
When did you discover podcasts? Do you remember the year?
I think it was about 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I mean, I knew about them before then, but I saw them as sort of this weird sort of thing that like Kevin Smith and his buddy were doing. I didn't, see a lot of, value in it. And then where I really started to latch onto it is there was a Joe Rogan podcast that I just happened to stumble on. And he had a guest that was very far right and a guest that was very far left. And they had the most intelligent, civil, nuanced 2.5 hour conversation about their positions on things where, at the end of it, everybody could kind of agree that, they agreed on 90% of, the issues out there. They just, felt kind of strongly a little bit about this thing, about that thing. I was like, wow, this never happens.
I was going to say that's such the opposite of Fox News or MSNBC or CNN right now. Everybody's fighting for that 5-second soundbite. So it's
right.
It's about scoring points versus actually having an intelligent conversation.
And there's no nuance. I mean, you're not getting any information about, what people really think or what they believe. Somebody will say, I introduced this bill, and they will give it a title that makes it sound like a very benign thing, and they're counting on the fact that nobody is actually going to dive in and read the 300, 400, 500 pages of that bill to find out what's actually in it. They'll call it something like the, We Love Americans Act. How could you vote against the We Love Americans Act?
Right.
And both sides do it.
Yeah. It's politics.
So, the podcasts, are really the only place where I think you get long form conversation that, people can't hide behind a soundbite. They actually have to explain their position, and they have to do it in a way that will get you to listen to them for 45 minutes or however long it is. So, I mean, I love podcasts.
Do you have some favorites you'd be willing to share? So if people are listening and they are either watching or listening, they might be listening to the podcast. And
Joe Rogan,
Joe Rogan.
It amazes me that the Fear Factor UFC guy is the leading, voice for civil conversation these days. There's a podcast called Masters of Scale that I really like. There's one called Business Wars that I'll listen to occasionally, especially when they've got a couple of businesses that, I'm interested in, Blockbuster versus Netflix, that kind of thing. And then How I Built This, where,
I just started listening to that one recently where they go through different businesses. They just not too long ago had the founder of Slack.
Yep.
And how Slack was really a science project on the side in between his failed video game businesses.
Yeah.
And he cranked out the Slack that we all use. Like, what was it, in 6 weeks?
Yeah, it's something. I heard that one as well, and it's just ridiculous that it's so not the thing. It's a tool that he built just to use internally. He didn't see any value for it outside of that. It's just like, well, it'd be nice if we had this thing internally. And
my teams are all working remote. We need to talk and collaborate, and let's go. The tool doesn't exist. Let's build it. And literally he had to close one video game business because it just wasn't working. And he was planning to open a new one, and he built this in his downtime, so he didn't have to lay his team off.
But yeah, I love those kind of podcasts, especially when we are struggling with, things within our own business, because so much of so often when you read certain books or you hear certain stories or what have you, it's the highlight reel, and it makes it feel like it was just all predestined and that it all worked. And so the podcasts, like the How I Built This, and some of the books, like I read Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, you start to realize that, everybody who has built something great, really got their teeth kicked in for a really long time before they got to the point where everybody was like, look at that overnight sensation. I mean, look how, if it would be so easy if we were Nike or Apple or whoever. And then you get the history, and you get to understand that, yeah, I mean, they went through the same stuff that we go through, where, there's things that don't go your way, or things that you thought would, go one way and they go a completely different way. So yeah, I think those are fantastic.
Yeah, I would say my personal experience, I discovered podcasts about 4 years ago. And for me, it was nothing short of a turning point for my personal mental health, because
Mm-hmm.
I was so busy being busy for so many years that I had this hunger for education and learning, but it was hard for me to find a format that I could commit to on an ongoing basis. Like I'll read a book, and I read books regularly, but I'm not an avid reader.
Right.
And or you could, I watch YouTube videos on occasion, but I feel guilty sitting there staring at YouTube. But I can walk and exercise. So I try to walk 5, 6 days a week every morning, and I can listen to history, economics, science, marketing, cryptocurrency, whatever my cup of tea in that moment,
Sure.
I can consume it. And I don't know, it's game changing.
Well, it's easy to get very insular with our businesses and our family lives and all that kind of thing, and to not do a great job of letting those outside influences help shape your thought.
Right.
Because almost everything we're going through, somebody else has already gone down that road, somewhere, somehow. And it's amazing how many times you'll pick up a book or you'll listen to a podcast where they'll just be one snippet, and you might read 300 pages just for that one snippet, where it's just like, okay, that crystallizes this issue for me. Now I understand why I'm struggling with this thing, or now I understand why that guy is this way, or whatever. So yeah, it same thing. Mental health, it totally, is kind of
It's
a breather.
Amen. I agree. We're about 45 minutes in, Matt, believe it or not. And I like to close out with a couple of things. I like to close out first of all with some words of advice or wisdom. You've been around the block. You've been in actual war, and you've with your military background, and you've been in this industry on different sides of the equation for a number of decades. So we have a lot of listeners and folks watching and listening that are at various stages of or positions of leadership within their company. And many people are going through some very challenging times right now. What words of wisdom, what comes top of mind for you if people were to have that, say, one or two nugget of gold that they were able to implement? What would that be for you?
Well, anybody who's worked with me at all over the last 15, 20 years, they've heard me talk about the two goals speech, all the time. Um, and I'll share this with our teammates. I'll share this with our customers too. Um, but when it comes to projects, if we want to take on a project, the project has to meet two criteria. So we have two goals, and goal number one is that we have to be able to do it profitably. Um, and goal number two is that we have to be allowed to do it in such a way that would be happy to put our name on it, that the client will hopefully evangelize us when it's all done. And too often, and I've been guilty of it myself, even over these last several years, you'll be chasing work or something like that, and you'll go, okay, well, as long as we make a profit, I'm willing to do the work this way, even though I know I'm not going to be proud to have my name on it, or vice versa. We need to get some exposure, so let's discount this heavily to get it, but we'll have our name on it. If a project can't get you those two things, you probably shouldn't be doing it. And I guess the only other nugget of wisdom, very often when I see people trying to solve problems, they keep trying to find the one thing, that just one thing that is the crux of the problem. And it's never one thing. It's always a bunch of things. And all of those
often a bunch of little things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like troubleshooting. If you're out in the field and you're troubleshooting, if it's just one thing, somebody didn't hook up a wire correctly or something like that, it's fairly easy to solve. If you have two things going on, then the troubleshooting becomes that much more difficult because it's hard to isolate. Same thing with problems in your business. It's very, very rarely one thing. It's usually a series of things, and all of them have to be addressed to some degree. You may prioritize one over the others, but it's naive to think, okay, if I just do this one thing, everything will be better and everything will work now. It never works that way.
No, that's awesome sound advice from Matt Lein. We do have a quick comment here. We have Matt, or we have Joe Whitaker, and he says, "Hi, Matt and Ron, good stuff." And
St. Louis guy,
another St. Louis guy, and he is CEDIA strong. So, Joe, thank you for that comment. And he also says, "Never sacrifice quality ever." So,
amen.
Great comments. Matt, how can folks that are listening or watching that might want to learn more about you or your company, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Easiest way to get in touch with me is just my email, mlein@des3s.com, MLIEN@des3s.com.
All right, I'm going to attempt to put that on the screen. So MLIEN
@des3s.com.
3S. I'm going to put it on the screen, and then you tell me if I did it right.
Yep.
All right. So
and then that's our website, and we've got our Facebook page and all that good stuff. So, yeah, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, Matt, it was a pleasure to have you on episode 111 of Automation Unplugged.
Made it painless.
Wasn't too hard, right?
Yeah.
Just a conversation.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you, brother. Stay safe and stay healthy, and tell Kevin and team that the team at One Firefly say hello.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
All right. So, guys, there you have it. Matt Lein, fun, frank, honest conversation there. We did just get a comment. Chris says, "Great content, gents. Thanks, Ron and Matt." You are welcome, Chris. Happy to bring this to you guys, gals. We're going to keep this content cranking for you. As long as we're in quarantine, we're going to keep doing more shows than normal. If you're out there and you're interested in being on the show, reach out to me and let me know that, and we'll try to get you on the schedule. That goes for you, Chris Palmer. Goes for you, Matt DeVance. Goes for you, Sarah Drescher. I see bunches of comments here. And on that note, I'm going to let you get back to your regularly scheduled programming. I will do the quick plug for the podcast. Again, this show is available in podcast. You do need to subscribe. So just go to your favorite app. It's the Purple Podcast app if you're on an iPhone. And just Google, or not Google, but use the search thingy and look for Automation Unplugged, and you can subscribe, and you'll have all the show content there. And it was my pleasure to do another show for you. I want you to have a wonderful afternoon and or morning or evening, wherever you're consuming this content. And I'll catch you on the flip side. Thanks, everyone. Be well.